Welcome to another revision session. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of areas that we probably haven't actually covered before you go into your mock exams, and that's the Learning Outcomes 2, the hardware, software and techniques for the pre-production, health and safety considerations, and then for the Learning Outcome 3, being able to produce pre-production. Then we're looking at the file formats and their properties, and the main focus there will be the moving images and audio, although I will recap with the still images for you. So let's move straight on and have a look at the hardware and software and techniques. Hardware is the physical devices and peripherals, i.e. your mouse, your keyboard, graphic tablets, printers, monitors, pen and paper. Do not in the exam put down a computer as something that helps you create a pre-production document, because that's not strictly true. It is the mouse and the keyboard that you're using to do that job. Obviously, those things that you can't actually touch, the software, the operating systems, the programs, the apps, they're all coming under that guise of software. So Windows 10, the operating system, the image editing software, web browsers, they are all software. Techniques, that refers to the way in which we do something in an iMedia context, and that might be a hand-drawn document, a digitally created document, digitized documents, and or hard copy, which is what would be the result of you printing something out. So getting the necessary terminology is important there. So let's go straight away and have a closer look at the hardware. So our main creation tools are either digital or manual in this regard. Digital creation covers, as I said already, mouse and keyboard, graphics tablets. Will also though include things like still cameras, video cameras, microphones, music keyboards, anything that's going to be input really. So usually just remembering the first two in that list is sufficient to demonstrate that you know the difference between hardware and software, of course. And sometimes you'll be told that a pre-production document that you are dealing with is in a hard copy. Now this means it was either created manually by hand or it has actually been printed out from a printer. Digital creative hardware is normally, as I said, input devices, but obviously a monitor is an output device, as are speakers, printers and plotters. And in regards to printers and plotters, if you're going up to sort of like anything over A3 size of page, then you'll need to use a plotter to actually output that work. Slightly closer look at the software involved here. One thing that you do need to remember, of course, with this is when you are referring to software, you should always try to use the generic description of the software type first, and then support that with a named brand. As an example, as you can see here, I've used image editing software such as Adobe Photoshop. In addition to the image editing software, I would suggest you take a look at the others below here. So we've got word processing software, presentation software, desktop publishing software, web browsing software, web editing software, and video editing software. Now, if the software that you're using is another software product, specifically for a task, then that is known as dedicated software. So you might use something like some mind mapping software. Okay, there are things like Inspiration and Mind Map. Mind Map, I think it is a web version of that, and things such as Storyboard that or Tune Storyboard and things like that, I think are examples of dedicated software for a particular purpose. So once you've established that link between both software and hardware, then you're going to be having a look at the techniques. And an important thing to note here is that all pre-production documents can be created both manually by hand or as digital or as a combination of both. And by that I mean sometimes people will start with a written things like a mood board or perhaps a mind map, and they may well then just scan that in and then amend it digitally. So the manual creation means, as I said, either handwritten or hand drawn, but could also mean a painting or a collage, especially for a mood board. if you've got lots of different textures on there. And obviously digital creation is done using the appropriate software on a computer. Now, once a document is created, in order for it to be stored and distributed nowadays, realistically, you will need to digitize it. So you'll either have to scan it, as I said previously, or possibly taking a picture of it. If you've got something that's larger than can go on your scanner, of course, then a picture on your phone and transfer that across is probably the best way of doing it. So that really is everything that you need to know about the software, the hardware, and the techniques. You just need to be careful of the fact that the exam board will tell you which type you've got, and then they might say to you, oh well, how would you get a hard copy of your mind map that's been created on the software? And you just need to understand that that means that they're asking you, how would you print it out? Okay, moving on. Health and safety is something that we don't usually do until very near the end of the theory lessons, but it is an integral part of what we do in not just in our media, but anywhere anyone works really. The main things that we need to understand for the exam is that there are three things that they are really looking at. First of all, the recce, then a risk assessment, and the safe working practices. Now, the recce just is short for reconnoiter. It means to go and visit the site in advance to establish the suitability for the use for filming, etc. And that kind of visit is done to establish a few key things. One, how should everyone get there, and how can you get all the equipment to the exact site that you're actually on? Have you got the access that you require? Perhaps things like the lighting. Are you've got natural light where you need it? Are you going to need to have power for night shots or something like that? And if so, what kind of power you're going to need to have? Is there access to the grid in some way that you could get it from an electricity company or from a local farm or something like that you pay an amount to them for use of? Or you're going to actually have to get generators or something to the site. There are environmental issues such as, what's the land like? Is it a floodplain or something like that? Are you close to water? All of those are considerations. And generally speaking, the thing that is then coming out of that recce is certainly a risk assessment. And also, obviously, any other potential issues that are there. Now, the findings of that recce should be recorded in a report or on a table that details all of the actions that might be required by any other members of the team, etc. The risk assessment itself, that's quite important. As I said, it's vital for any environment, whether it's the temporary one on site or whether it's permanent. And the key things to remember is as follows. The assessment is supposed to identify the potential of risk. Okay, and that is whether there's going to be that potential for risk of injury to someone. That's the main thing that they're looking at. What is the severity of that risk? So if it were to transpire that there would be an accident, what's the likely result of that? What actions are needed to reduce that risk to an acceptable level? And there is always risk in everything we do. As you go to cross a road, there's an inherent risk. You have to take precautions to make sure that you are not injured, and that's the same with anything else that we do. And then we just need to record the actions that are required. And sometimes that requires recording who is also responsible for ensuring that those actions are carried out, and obviously to create some sort of review procedure to make sure that the assessment is kept up to date and everything that we're doing currently is actually doing what it's supposed to do in reducing the risk of someone getting hurt. Now, one important note is there that a risk assessment does not require you to remove the risk. Once the risks are known and precautions are known and everybody is responsible for making sure that the location is safe, that should be enough. So, such things as if there was going to be something like an open fire there for some reason because you were doing, some scene from a film or other and it required there to be an open fire there for a while. Whilst that was being set up and it was burning down to the level that was required, you'd need to have some fencing around that to make sure people aren't going and falling over. You need to make sure that nothing's in the way and going to get burnt, etc., etc. As on the table that I started there, you can see, if you've got a camera platform up to do some, higher shots, there is a risk that people could fall from the platform, that equipment could fall from the platform. So that level of risk is quite severe. You need to make sure that you've got the safety barriers in place. You need to make sure that somebody is responsible, and there it says that the site safety officer, who you probably would have somebody appointed as, and also the camera crew themselves. Everybody's responsible for health and safety. And of course, a review there is after every use to make sure that it's always in place. So once you've done that risk assessment, then you can also have a look at the other working practices that you've got. Now, if you're in the office, of course, you could be working quite a lot with the computers. And here you just need to ensure that people are really seated comfortably and they're not becoming strained during any prolonged use of a computer. And by prolonged use, it's anyone that's going to be at their machine for more than a couple of hours. They need to take breaks. They need to make sure they've got the correct postures, that they're not subjecting themselves to eye strain or repetitive strain injuries to their hands or their arms, etc. And chairs should be comfortable. Obviously, they should have a height adjustment so that the head position is normal when you're looking at the screen. So you're not either always bent down looking at the screen or bent up. So therefore, the neck is not under strain. Users should be within easy reach of the keyboard and mice and have their wrists supported whilst they're using that. So again, avoiding those repetitive strain injuries. And obviously they should be close enough so that they can see the text without straining their eyes, and make sure that they have regular eye tests would not be a bad idea either. And moving on, couple of things, and all of these that we're just going to look at quickly now should be part of the risk assessment if any of these things are required during the creation of your iMedia. So basically working at height. So again, we go back to that platform example, making sure both the humans and the equipment doesn't fall off, safety barriers, harnesses, etc. Platforms on ladders that are on level surfaces and secured. It's just common sense stuff, but it's making sure that everybody is aware of those. Again, working with electricity, so covers cables, both low voltage as well as the high voltage ones, the location and the environment that they're used in, whether they are indoors and outdoor, and are they actually suitable for that. Ones that are outdoor, are they actually waterproof ones? Make sure there's no trip hazards, make sure the condition of the equipment that is attached to those cables and the cables themselves don't have any bits showing, so nobody's going to get an electric shock, etc., etc. Working with heavy equipment, this includes items in transit and when they're stored, and we specifically mention that because just a set of lights may not in themselves be that heavy to start off with, and normally speaking one person can move them around on the site, but quite often when they're being moved to site they're going to go into some heavy crates to keep them safe so that they're not damaged, and then the weight becomes quite an issue, and instead of being able to move them easily as one person, you're into the realms of two or more people, or possibly even lifting equipment. So you need to make sure you're using the correct techniques to avoid injury, making sure that you're using the correct technique and the number of people to avoid injury, and of course making sure even when then you come to set it up, because some of these things are taken apart, when you put them back together you're not trying to sort of hang on to bits and pieces while you're putting nuts and bolts in and run the risk of things falling off and injuring you or anyone else again. So it sounds like it should be fairly straightforward, but again, it really needs to be on those risk assessments to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So that's the Learning Outcome 2 requirements taken care of. Now let's have a look at these Learning Outcome 3s and the file formats. Now, you should probably remember most of this from working on your R082 unit. What I've done here is I simply listed the pre-production documents there that we are likely to come across, plus of course the work plan and the production schedules, and I've given you the type of formats that we'd probably expect to see and why we would use those. And you'll note there that on virtually all of them I've got that you could do a PDF for reviewing them, and the reason that is of course that every time we want to send something for review, we have to make sure that whoever is reading that is actually going to be able to read it, and they're going to see it in the quality and the only software that really does that is the PDF, because it is completely device independent and it is completely platform independent. So that means if you sent somebody an email with your PDF as an attachment, if they can actually download that email, then they should be able to get a reader, an Acrobat reader for that device, and therefore they should be able to see your creation, whatever that happens to be, whichever document, and it should be pretty much in the same sort of quality that you created it in, because the PDF obviously will keep that quality, although in a smaller file size. So definitely remember that. Look at those formats and just see what we're talking about there. Only sort of slightly different ones there. Scripts, predominantly text based, so they're going to be in word processing documentation. And the work plan and schedule there, if you do need to do those, then spreadsheet software is the way to go for that. Okay, so the things that we haven't really covered at all are the moving file formats and animation. Now these, I've put a table in quite simply just to let you know what they're about. If you have a look down the list there, everything down to WebM is pretty much video, and then the Shockwave Flash below that is the type of thing that you would use for animation. But because, as it says at the top, most of the time you'll be asked for a sort of a final file format, what you would actually send out so that the end user could use it. That's why we've got these formats here. These are the ones that you would probably use in the end. And please note on the SWF there, Shockwave Flash format. Flash format is being withdrawn in December 2020. So that would now only be for legacy systems, and the one above it, the WebM moving, is pretty much a replacement for that. So whereas before just about every browser on the planet had support for Flash, nowadays that's going to be support for HTML5 and WebM. And that's what most manufacturers or developers will be actually encoding their media files in. So gives you a quick look at the lossy and lossless ones, what's compressed, what isn't, how the file sizes generally look, what sort of support you can expect from those various file formats. So moving on now to the audio formats. We don't do an audio unit, but obviously we do a video unit, and inside of that, more than likely you will need to have some knowledge of these audio formats, and certainly for the exam you might well get asked what would be a audio format that would be appropriate for a final file. If you're looking for really top quality, then you could possibly go for a WAV file, but anything realistically that's internet based or sort of personal player based, then MP3 is going to be the way to go. Again, the WebM player does play audio, and it is now suitable for just about every web application. But just to give you that summary down the bottom, if it's a moving image or an animation, then realistically just remember MP4. That would probably do well enough for any kind of moving image file that you've got, whether that's created as an animation, it can certainly be saved as an MP4. Unless the file is just something like an animated picture, you know, one of those little moving pictures that you see, then obviously GIF is still the go-to for that. No reason to change that at the current moment. For audio, MP3 is pretty much your best choice. It does give good quality, small file size, goes on most mobile devices, and certainly for MP3 players, it's exactly what they were designed for in the first place. So that really takes care of all the little bits and pieces that we've not covered yet. All of that is available in the Creative Media revision notes book, which you've been given by the Chief Examiner Kevin Wells. I'll also take you back to the top here and just remind you, of course, that should you need to, having a look at the hardware, software, and techniques in greater detail, you can go to lessons 26 to 28. That covers those three. And if you want to have another look at the file formats for the still images, that's lessons 14 and 15, and for moving images in audio, then you're talking lessons 20 and 21. All of those are available on the Google Drive, the shared drive there. Okay, good luck. See you soon. Bye.